When it comes to epic fantasy, you may wonder how we got from this to this. And that's an interesting question, and I believe I have the answer for you, and it is this trilogy of the Chronicles of the Black Company by Glen Cook. And yes, I've done reviews for the first two books in the trilogy, The Black Company and Shadow's Linger, and today we're talking about The White Rose, the book that finishes this chapter of the Black Company. I know there are other Black Company books. In my previous two reviews, I've talked about how many shades of Malazan you can see in the Black Company, or better yet, how many elements Stephen Erickson got by this book. And the Tolkien aspect, I haven't thought about it much, to be honest, but reading this one, I cannot but notice that actually owes a lot to Lord of the Rings. Something that separates J.R. Tolkien and Glen Cook from a lot of fantasy authors is that they both were veterans. Tolkien fought in World War I, and Glen Cook fought in Vietnam. And also, their books, both Lord of the Rings and The Black Company, feel like it's common people that are in the middle of a huge war, relaying their memoirs of it. Lord of the Rings, we have the Company of the Ring, mostly Frodo, who writes the story in the end, and in this one we have Croker, the medic of the Black Company. The Black Company are mercenaries. They started as, I guess they were from the whole segment of Africa, but they were hired by the Lady. The Lady is, in Lord of the Rings terms, think of Sauron had a girlfriend, and she got loose after Sauron was destroyed, and she took over the Middle-earth and made an empire. Yes, she's a witch, she's cruel, she's scary, she has the Taken, who are basically Nazguls, Askew generals, and the Black Company has survived this. And the Black Companies are mercenaries, they're not good people. Yes, Croker is not that explicit about it, but it's implied quite a lot. That's something that separates the Black Company from a lot of fantasy too. This very cynical, very grim take on war. Because, let's be honest, both, unlike most epic fantasy, which like war is great, the Black Company is not about the war being great. It's about the war being something bad, something you don't want to be into. And that's something that Tolkien did in Lord of the Rings. I watched the movies recently, and I cannot but notice that now, how war is treated like a scary thing, and that makes the big battles feel much better. In The White Rose, we get into a very complex beginning, I guess, because a lot of things happened in the previous two books. I won't spoil it for you. I'll keep this spoiler free, and I'll talk about the entire trilogy at the end of this review. Basically, the Black Company is somewhere that is a very strange place, both as, you know, a faction where their alliances lie, as well as where they physically are, because they are some place where the laws of nature and probably the laws of magic are off kilter. And Croker, the medic, is receiving some messages from an ally, I guess, that relay some old stories that actually give us a background of how we got to the return of the Lady. And this is a bit jarring because we get into those tales of other people that are around the burying place, the burial place of the Dominator and his servants. And it's not quite clear when everything happens in the beginning, but as the plot progresses and we read more about it, we get a picture of what's happening. And book one was more like Croker writing a big epic war in notes, taking notes about it, a big campaign. Shadow's Linger felt more like a novel, and it was mostly about characters. It was about the Black Company and Raven, who had their own misadventures in a city. It was much of a smaller plot, I guess, more contained, and also felt more like a novel. This is somewhere in the middle, because we still have the epic battles and a big conclusion to everything that's happening. But also we're following characters, we're getting into more the headspaces. Croker here is much more himself. He talks much more about who he is, how he feels. His character is more fleshed out. The relationships with other characters in the books are also explored much further. It takes a while to warm up. It's a slow burner and starts a bit in the thick of it with a lot of plot lines that are not they're set up, but they converge towards the end. That feels very Malazan to me. That's how Steven Erikson writes, but it lacks the complexity and epic scale of Malazan. It's much more contained, much more. It implies a lot of things. A lot of things are left implied because Croker is our point of view, and we only follow Croker and what he's doing, not other things. So we're told that other things are happening, or it's implied that other things are happening, and that's something that feels maybe a bit alienating, I guess. It's not, it doesn't go either way. It's some sort in a limbo, but that's not much of a problem, because when we get towards the end, towards the big climax of the trilogy, then a lot of things happen. The payoffs are there. It feels like you made a big trip with a company and it led somewhere, and you'll miss some of those very colorful characters. I would like to have more characters, to be honest, because the characters were few, because we're following a few. What I really liked was the relationship between Croker and the lady who is the big bad of this book, I guess. I won't spoil much about it, but definitely it's not a black and white situation, and the way this relationship evolves, especially in book one and now, how it continues in this book, because I think it was a bit of it was not that touched upon in the second book. It's really interesting in where it leads. That's something that I liked, and I feel that it somewhat overshadowed the other relationships of this book, something that, yeah, I was not a big fan of. But I find it hard to talk more about this book without spoiling it, so I'll stop here. Definitely this book is a recommend, and the trilogy is a confident recommend this time. I was not won over by the first two books. I wasn't won over by the first book because of the way it was written, and I like the second book. I think that the third one is going somewhere differently, and I was not that happy about it. However, I feel that overall this trilogy is very interesting, both on its own merit and for what it represents for fantasy fiction, because the title of this video is the trilogy that changed epic fantasy forever. And the Black Company introduces a lot of cynicism and realism and anti-heroes to the epic fantasy formula. It's written by a veteran, which is a welcome change to, to geeky guys writing after Tolkien that may have never through a patch in their lives. Well, Ray Salvatore had, but I doubt anybody else had, of the epic fantasy authors. And he has been in war. He knows what war is, and he writes about it in a way that Tolkien never did, because Tolkien was a perfect gentleman, and Glen Cook, even though he has been in an equally infamous war in his lifetime, he writes his own truth, what it's like being a soldier. The legacy he left was carried on by Steven Erikson, of course, who probably based his bridge burners on the Black Company and a lot of the grimdark authors. I would say that the people inspired by Glen Cook definitely left better work, but even without the literary relevance of the Black Company, it's still an entertaining read because it's different. It goes somewhere that people haven't gone before, and maybe the people who followed on Glen Cook's footsteps never quite got to. I mean, I can see the crippled god in the Dominator. I can see Lassine in the Empress, and also I can see Dominator in another character. I can see the Black Company, the Bridge Burners. I can see Croker in Fiddler. I can see Quick Ben in Silent. Yeah, I mean, I can see the Captain in Whiskey Jack. Yeah, it's everything. It's everywhere. Well, it never goes that intricate and that complicated. The Black Company does offer a realistic take on fantasy empires and fantasy warfare, on Dark Lords and rebellion, what it's like to ally yourself with the lesser evil, or not. Things happen in this book. And yeah, I mean, the quote here is single-handedly changed the face of fantasy by Steven Erikson, and it's absolutely true. It's an entertaining read. It's a bit, the way it's written, it's not your typical fantasy book. It's very experimental, I guess, but it works. It's not fast read, but it's not a hard read. You can follow the events easily. Maybe it's worth imagining what's missing at some points, but that's no big problem, because it's mostly the events, especially in the first book, The Black Company. Definitely recommend. I don't know, have you read this one? Have you read The Black Company? If you have, what do you think about it? So thank you for watching, and stay spooky.